Welcome into Studio A. I'm Maria Trivelpiece alongside Kyle Youmans, who is reliving his high school basketball days. Did you play in high school?
I'm just trying to get back to the glory days. That's all.
When you average like what, 3 a game, or
yeah, at least 4.
At least 4,
yeah.
4 points per game,
and then 5 rebounds sometimes.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about people who average a little bit more than that because it was quite the
I'm
week.
in a media career, okay, Maria? This is how we're starting the show today.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if I can't make fun of you, then you can't make fun of me. And I know
you were D1 divisions. You were a student athlete.
I was, but you don't. This is my hot take. I wasn't very athletic. I just was skilled. I had decent hand-eye coordination, and I was a very, very average student athlete, like average.
I hate this.
And anyway, this is a basketball show. We can't get into softball because you won't shut me up. You can't really shut me up anyway because I talk too much, which is, again, why I'm in my media career. But what everyone wants to hear about is the week in men's basketball in the American Athletic Conference, because what a week it was. Preseason number 1 played preseason number 2. We're starting to see teams separate who's at the top of the American, who's going to fall closer to the bottom, and then some upsets, some teams playing a little bit better than anticipated and having a good season so far. But at the top, Memphis and North Texas. When you look at that, does that surprise you? You probably not, because you've been on the Mean Green train for a little bit.
Yeah, I kind of saw coming what North Texas was building in the offseason through the transfer portal and the experience there. And then Memphis is that's a real contender. I mean, they're unbelievable across the board. I mean, that's an at-large bid waiting to happen the way that they've played this year with some of the big-time wins. But since the last time that we talked, of course, Memphis is playing their best basketball of the season. Temple falters during a Texas two-step at North Texas and then at UTSA as well. The Mean Green themselves keeping pace up there at the top with the Tigers of Memphis. And then East Carolina making a little mid-season push along the way. And as we look there in the top 4, Memphis, North Texas, UAB, I think we all could have expected them at least somewhat to have good years. I want to give a shout out to the Tulane Green Wave.
Yes.
They've been tremendous. The surprise of the season so far. What a job by Ron Hunter and his staff to make the most out of their first leg of conference play. They've almost matched their entire win total last year, and they've already surpassed or at least matched their conference win total from a year ago. So great start to the season, and we've still got a long way to go. We're not even a halfway point in conference play yet.
I feel like so much has happened already that we could write books on this season, just with the discrepancies and what teams are good and how many.
Are you going to write a book on this season?
I don't know if I have time, but maybe I'll do an audio book, because then I could just talk, walk, talk, get the morning miles and that sort of thing.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so audio book coming out on the American Athletic Conference men's basketball.
American Hoops audiobook.
Yes. I hope everyone will listen. But let's go back to that North Texas Mean Green team. We both had the chance to be on the call for their Temple game, and wow, I think that was just a statement win. Temple coming off that big win over Memphis at home. Now they have to go on the road to play the Mean Green, who's undefeated at home and still undefeated at home. And both teams played really well in that first half. It was gritty. It was tough. But North Texas coming out on top once again at the Super Pit. 11-0 so far.
Yeah, and the atmosphere just continues to get better and better. I still being around this program and just being in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, I still think the crowds could be better. I think the community needs to rally around just how good this North Texas team is. They are built the right way. They're built to have some success. Ross Hodge deserves a ton of credit as to what they've done, and not just Ross Hodge, but the entire athletic department and the coaching staff as well. They've built a juggernaut there at North Texas. And I just also want to mention, this is the 20th episode of All-American, and this is the first time that we're starting the show talking about North Texas, whether it was football or basketball. So I just want that to be known. If you're ever asking about bias, that's what it is. But they deserve to be the top topic of conversation. They're top 50 in the net. They're top 50 in KenPom. Their only losses of the season are to Memphis. Of course, we know what Memphis is. The McNeese Cowboys, and then Utah State. Those 3 losses are all against, right now, tournament teams, according to Joe Lenardi's bracketology. And then the other one was the High Point, a team on the outside looking in and has a very good shot at winning their conference as well. So you could have very well seen North Texas lose to 4 NCAA tournament teams, and those are the only 4 times that they faltered, and all those games were close. They were all within single digits, and they've played pretty well across the board. This team has what last year's team didn't, Maria, and that is depth. Yes. My goodness, they have depth across the board. Brenen Lorient leads the way off the bench. He's been incredible in conference play. Top 10 in scoring in conference play, averaging 16.3 points per game. He's 3rd in the American in field goal percentage. 59% is what he's making from the field, and he's kind of an inside-out shooter, so that's really impressive that he's knocking on the door of 60%. And then he's 3rd in the American Conference in blocks through conference play. 13 blocks in 7 games. He's been tremendous for this North Texas team, and I don't think it starts and stops with him. They've got guys coming off the bench like a Jonathan Massey, who's been great. You've got Jasper Floyd, who stepped up in a bigger role in the guard spot overall. Adden Wright is making a push for all-conference honoree mention as well. There's a lot going on in Denton, and they have that thing clicking.
Well, I really liked what Ross Hodge told us in the fact that he doesn't really see starters or people on the bench, 6 men and that sort of thing. Yeah. He has his rotation of players, and he just moves them in and out of the game. He said that there's really no discrepancy for him, and I think that you see that when you're playing, right? Because those guys know that they're going to get in the game immediately. They're not really focused on who's starting, who's not. That can create a little bit of drama, whether people want to admit that or not. They know that they're going to get in the game. They know that they're going to play team basketball. I think that's another thing as well that is very understated about this team. When you go and look at all of the guys that Hodge got out of the portal, one of the common threads in every single article that you read is that they wanted to play tough, gritty basketball. So they're bought into this brand of basketball. I think him and his staff did a great job of recruiting people who would fit their style of play and who want to play for a team. I think especially in this era of college basketball, it's sometimes hard because you're competing for NIL and all these other things. He got the guys that are wanting to play good defense, who want to be tough and gritty, and they're coming together, and any given guy can step up in a big way. Absolutely. On a certain night. You talk about Lorient, he's playing some great basketball right now. Adden Wright had his moments where he was doing really well. So I just think that this team has a lot of good pieces, and because they gel so well together and they want to win basketball games as opposed to, individually score a lot of points, that's really helping the Mean Green.
And a lot of that carries over from the Grant McCasland years of the success that North Texas had with Grant McCasland. Ross Hodge takes over. He's in his 2nd year as head coach after he was the associate under McCasland for 7 years. But that's because Hodge was the mastermind behind a lot of that success for North Texas. And so when you talk about the depth and the rotation and the one guy one night, another guy another night, that's by design. And it's different even from what Grant McCasland had success with. You think back to those teams that McCasland loved. They had some guys that were really good, but they had the go-to scorer. They had Tyler Perry. They had Javion Hamlet. They had those high-end scorers that they had to rely on, and those guys had to have 15, 20, 25 points a night to even be in the ball game. Adden Wright doesn't have to score 20 points to have a win. You don't have to have Latrell Giselle or Mulai Sissoko play well. By the way, Sissoko's been playing very well.
We got to chat a little bit about him.
Yeah, he's been tallying the scoring. He's been rebounding pretty well, 6th in the American in conference only rebounding right now. But across the board, you don't have to have that because you have so many different elements. Grant Newell is another one that has stepped up and has just played efficient basketball. I want to give the credit to Rondell Walker. He's been in and out due to injury. There are some games where he doesn't make an impact, but then there's other games where the TCU transfer is almost unstoppable along the way. It is a depth-filled basketball team, something they didn't have last year when they only went 7 or 8 deep into that bench. Now they can go 9, 10 players, 11 players deep if they want to, and they wear teams down. Ask Temple, ask UAB, ask Florida Atlantic this past week as well. All 3 of those teams had leads in those games, and they just could not hold on because North Texas wears you down, and they're going to continue to do that because that's what they're built to do.
Not only do they wear you down, they also have the ability to be a little bit more aggressive, right?
Yes.
Because okay, you get in foul trouble, there's somebody right there to fill your spot. Not that you want to get in foul trouble. You don't want to. That's not the point, but I'm just saying that there's a little bit less fear to dive for a basketball, to maybe take an extra step. And I think that maybe doesn't show up in numbers, but it shows up in the wearing down of teams. It shows up in just that little extra toughness that somebody might be like, oh, I'm a little bit more hesitant now to go after a basketball. They're looking good on both sides of the ball. We talk so much about the North Texas defense. They're at the top of the conference in that. They wear you down. They stifle you. They want to play incredibly tough. But because of that, they're also creating a lot of offense with that defense. They don't care. And we've talked about this on the show before. They don't care if they're scoring in the 60s. They just need to score one more point than you. They're fine with being right there, but their offense, as we already mentioned, with Lorient, with some of those other players, is stepping up as well, and they're becoming very lethal.
And they are right now bottom of the conference in terms of points per game. Bottom.
Yep.
Dead last. That doesn't mean they're bad on offense. Let me let that be known. Because if you just look at that, you might say, wow, they're just really good on defense and they're really bad on offense, and it cancels each other out or whatever it ends up being. Not the case. They're top 75 in the country in terms of offensive efficiency rating, according to Ken Pom. They're currently number 75. That's the thing. They might be bottom half of the conference and actually dead last in points per game, but when they're on offense, they're efficient. They roll on offense. They make the buckets they need to, and they get the production need to. I've got a little bit of a rant, a very quick one.
Okay, let's hear it.
Just a little one.
Stare into the depths of the camera.
I keep talking about these national polls of Ken Pom and Net. They're both in the top 50. They're actually closing in on top 45, which is right where you want to be. Come tournament time, you want to be right around 45 to be in conversation of the at-large bid. It's about time North Texas gets some national credit. I've seen some sites on Twitter or whatever you call it now, X. I've seen some sites on there across the board that are starting to give North Texas a little more credit. Not enough. This is a team that's been to the NIT the last 3 years. They won the whole tournament in the NIT in 2023. And the last time they were in the big dance, they won a game against Zach Edey and Duke in Indianapolis. Give them some credit. This team is legitimate. They need to be in the at-large conversation squarely in order to do so. We'll see what happens along the way. But a team that is currently in that at-large bid right now is the Memphis Tigers. They're hoping for an automatic bid.
Yes.
But this team is legit. They just put up a century mark on UAB and the Blazers in a matchup of the preseason number 1 versus the preseason number 2.
It was a lot of fun to watch. Maybe not if you're a UAB fan, because we'll break down a little bit some of the struggles that the Blazers face. But talk about efficiency. Memphis was incredible offensively. PJ Haggerty is putting up 20-plus a game and making it look easy. Dane Danger gets to start for the first time since Game 3 of the season. He had, I think, 21 and 8 rebounds. He was incredible. So they're getting play from a bunch of different guys. And we already talked about the guard play of Memphis. They just look so good. And also, I just love how active they are on defense. I think like Haggerty, Tyrese Hunter do a really good job up top, just getting steals, getting the basketball, and creating offense from that defense as well.
Oh, yeah. This was, at least at this point in the season, this is the most impressive conference win out of anybody in the conference for me, because I have such a high respect for UAB and the talent level that they have there. We'll talk about the Blazers momentarily, but they put up 100 points. Remember, they actually won their matchup at the FedEx Forum against UAB last year, 106-87. So they put up a century mark against UAB last year, and they lost in Birmingham 97-88. These two do play again in Birmingham on March 2nd. Circled that calendar. But in this game, they jumped out to the 18-8 lead, kept on rocking from there. They only made 23 field goals on Thursday through the entire game against Wichita State in that weird matchup that they held on to and they won against the Shockers. They had 21 in the first half against UAB, up and down the floor and doing so with ease. And, of course, it's all started by P.J. Haggerty and what the phenomenal Memphis Tiger has been doing.
Oh, my goodness. He does a little bit of everything, right? I think the thing that impresses me the most is his ability to get to the foul line. I think we talked about it already on this show in our first episode, but he does such a great job not only getting to the foul line, making his foul shots. He can score on a bunch of different levels. He just is so athletic and can create shots. In addition to that, he does a pretty good job distributing as well. So I just love watching him play basketball. And here's the thing is everybody knew how good he was, right? Last year when he was at Tulsa, he did the same thing.
Yeah.
This conference knows who PJ Haggerty is. He's not a transfer from somewhere else. They know exactly what he's going to do, and they still can't stop him. He's just plowing through teams, and he's been incredible.
Second in the country in scoring, 22 points per game. Third in free throws made with over 140 now, and in free throws attempted. 14 games now with 20 points or more, and has converted at least 5 free throws in 16 of 20 games so far this season. He is the player of the year in the conference right now.
Right.
And here are some of the scorers across the board that have had great seasons in the country. I would put Haggerty in the conversation of player of the year. Right now, he's 9th in terms of Ken Palm's player of the year standings. I mean, that's an unofficial group and an unofficial metric along the way. But Haggerty being in that top 10 conversation, it kind of reminds me of what Bryson Daly was doing with the football, with Army football in the American. He's on a great team that's having some success, but doesn't get really the whole country's attention just yet. But he's just doing his own thing, scoring a ton of points and continuing to do it. And he ended up being in the Heisman conversation, 6th in the Heisman voting. P.J. Haggerty is doing that for Memphis right now. He needs to be a little bit higher than 9th on that list because he is everything for this Memphis Tigers team, and he does so efficiently and effortlessly.
It looks so
easy.
It literally looks so easy. It effortless. He's athletic, as we said. He's leading the way for this Memphis Tigers team, and he's also getting some support now, not just now, this entire season from some other guys like Tyrese Hunter, Colby Rogers, Dane Danger.
Hunter's fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to watch. So if they can continue to have the games that they're having and supporting Haggerty, that's not only going to help Haggerty play better, that's going to help the Tigers continuously get some more wins. And I think that combination is why they are where they are, not only in the American, but in the national rankings as well.
And I thought it was interesting that Penny changed the starting lineup again, putting Dane Danger back in the starting 5. He did so for the first 3 games of the year. And then turns around and puts them back in there for that UAB matchup. They're 4-0 now when starting those 5 guys with wins against UAB, Missouri, UNLV, and Ohio. And Danger rewarded him. He's had great supporting cast situations throughout the season. But now putting up 21 points. He was 10 for 12 from the floor against UAB, had 8 rebounds as well. I like that lineup. P.J. Haggerty, Tyrese Hunter, Colby Rogers, Nicholas Jourdain, and Dane Danger. That is a dangerous lineup, and that doesn't even count what they have on the bench moving forward.
I know. I feel like the trouble with playing Memphis is you can't just ISO on like a Haggerty. You can't just only focus on Hunter. You have to keep your eyes open on
everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Every person on the floor, and so I think that just helps the other players become better. Now, they had a chance to play UAB. We talked about them putting up that century mark. UAB has been playing well, though. Their only losses in the conference are to North Texas and to Memphis. So if you're going to lose to 2 teams, have it be the 2 that are at the top right now. So I think when we talked about them in that first episode, and we were still a little unsure just because of their non-conference. And again, I think they were like 7-6 in non-conference. We were just, holding them to probably an unreasonably high standard. So I think UAB is starting to click and find what makes them really good. They're top in the conference in offense. Yaxel Lendenborg is just picking up right where he left off. So I think the loss to Memphis yesterday, maybe not your favorite thing to do if you're the Blazers, but you get them again, and then you'll probably see them in the tournament.
Yeah, so you get them at home, and you're currently 3rd. I'm not worried about UAB. Yeah. Andy Kennedy knows how to get this team playing whenever you get ready for March and you get closer to the the tournament time. This team is built to wear others down over time. Kind of like what we talked about with North Texas defensively, UAB does it with offense. UAB does it by getting up and down the floor. And they had 5 straight wins between their 2 conference losses.
Right.
So the only concern is they're just not putting away teams the way that they probably should in those 5 games across the board. Of course, they lost to North Texas. They lost to UAB. They put away Tulsa. They put away Tulane. They beat FAU by 5. They kind of played with their food a little bit against South Florida and UTSA. They play Tulsa again on the road in Tulsa. Then they get Charlotte. Then they get North Texas again at home. That's a nationally televised game in its own right. They still are incredible on the offensive side. They aren't just doing it with tempo. They're 71st in adjusted tempo, which is 6th in the American. Yet they're the top-ranking team in the American for offensive efficiency, number 41 in the country, and they're, of course, in that scoring element, they're number 1 in the American, again, like they were last year. But they're 11th in scoring allowed. The defensive efficiency is not necessarily great. 260 in the country. You might score a lot, but you're giving up a lot. And that's where you have games like this against Memphis, a team that can hit at a high level. North Texas, that we talked about their offensive efficiency rating. If they continue to stay offensively efficient and continue to hit their shots, that's where UAB gets in trouble, and their matchups against those teams are much tougher along the way. They'll beat pretty much anybody across from them just because of the tempo and because of their athleticism and their length in their starting 5 and so on down. Don't count out UAB by any stretch, but they got to sure something up on the defensive end in these final couple months.
Well, I think you saw that play out in that game against Memphis because they struggled to hit some shots early in that game, and there were a couple early turnovers that Memphis just quickly and efficiently converted.
Yeah.
And I think then UAB was just unable to ever really get back into that game. And so I think that, yes, offensively they can score, but when they falter a little bit or they're not scoring at the highest clip that they want to, they need to figure out a way to shut other teams down.
That's what you got to do across the board. I want to talk about Yaxel Lindenborg a little bit as well. Lindenborg putting up Player of the Year numbers. If a guy named PJ Haggerty wasn't on the table and wasn't around, averaging 17 points per game, 10 rebounds, 4 assists. He is one of 4 players that the Blazers have in double figures. You've got Yaxel, Coleman, Vasquez, McGee that are all in double figures. This Blazers team knows how to get up and down the floor, and it's led by what Lindenborg does.
I saw this really cool graphic when I was watching the Memphis game. Yaxel Lindenborg is the only player in the country besides Cooper Flagg that leads in like 8 or not 8's a lot. Like all those categories. I can't remember every single category. I'm
pretty
gonna have
good
to go.
Company to be in.
Yes, but it's literally just him and Cooper Flagg that lead their teams in like 5 or 6 categories.
For those who don't know.
Sorry, yeah, I should have probably referenced that. But yeah, so I think that just speaks to the kind of player that he is, not only on his team, not only in the American, but also in the country, and also the kind of complete player he is. And I think that was the point that they were trying to make on the broadcast, just the fact that he's not only good in certain areas, like yes, he can score, but he can rebound, he can distribute. He is just an overall complete basketball player, and it has helped. There has been a balance around that UAB team offensively. We've talked about how their offense is very good, but I think that enough cannot be said about Yaxel Lindenborg because he is just playing so well. He was the preseason player of the year for a reason.
Yeah, no, he does a lot of things very, very well across the board. Do you think if, let's say, we get into tournament time, do you think he has enough support around him to make a run?
See, it's a good question, and I think he has support. I like the support that Memphis has around PJ Haggerty a little bit better at this point in the season, but I will also counter with the fact that UAB has more veteran presence. Veteran in the American Conference. Obviously, some of those transfers have played somewhere else. Like a Tyrese Hunter has had a lot of March experience, but I think that could be the advantage for UAB. I think the support of guys who have played and won conference championships is a little bit in favor of UAB. I think the talent and maybe like the leadership and veteranship from other parts of the country from those transfers on Memphis's team might help Memphis if we're going to compare those two, because in my mind those two in North Texas are at the top of the conference right now, and talking about support of like individual very good players, Memphis and UAB comparison would be that.
So as we transition from one of the better teams in the preseason poll, the UAB Blazers, like I mentioned earlier, one of the teams that did not get the love in the preseason poll but absolutely should have was the Tulane Green Wave. They've been on a roll this season, of course, rolling like a wave throughout this conference campaign so far. Already 11 wins this season. They're closing in on their gap of that 23-24 campaign already, and they've already matched their conference wins so far on the campaign, and we're not even the halfway point of conference play just yet.
I think it's been so exciting to see the way that they've been performing, because especially there's the preseason poll, right? But then there was also those non-conference games where we weren't sure yet, right? But now they're starting to play a little bit better. 5 conference wins already, and I really like the way that Ron Hunter has these guys playing.
And to talk more on that, let's welcome in the voice of the Green Wave, Corey Gloor, joining us now here on All-American. Corey, thanks for taking some time. We know you're a busy man. You've got a lot of basketball still left to be called, but it's got to be fun seeing the transition and the way that this team has been playing well so far.
100%, and thanks for having me, guys. To see this team from where they were in November, in which you had 10 new pieces, you had 7 of them that were freshmen or redshirt freshmen, and now 4 of them get regular time. To see them kind of stumble and figure out growing pains in the month of November, you started to see glimmers of them turning a corner in December, right at the end of non-conference play, and that has carried over into a very cohesive team that knows how to gel together, knows where the pieces fit into place right now for a 5-2 start in conference play. It's a team that just plays 40 minutes of intense, interested, and focused defense. And that's what's kept them in every game and allowed them to win most of their games so far in league play.
So with all those improvements along the way from last year to this year, a lot of credit goes to Coach Hunter and his staff of getting these guys ready and attacking the portal the way that they did. But what's the biggest improvement across the board that you've seen so far from last year to this season?
Yeah, I just touched on it a little bit there, Kyle. The defensive switch, the whole roster overhaul, and now this team is playing the matchup defense that Ron Hunter has made a 3-decade career out of really well. And that wasn't the case last year. Last year's team was much more offensive focused and a fast-paced team, a lot of possessions. This is not the case this year. They have been at the top of the league in scoring defense, field goal percentage defense all season long. They are terrific 3-point defense. They're also blocking a lot of shots here as well. And part of Ron Hunter's team throughout his years has been forcing turnovers. They've been doing that at a great clip as well. This is a young team that bought into the matchup defense early on. And yeah, it caused some problems early on because you can make mistakes in what can be a pretty complicated defense to figure out, but they figured it out now, and no time like now, because now they sit here in the top 4 of the league.
You know, it does look like they're starting to figure it out, Corey, but do you think it's coming from just the reps and playing together more, or is there something specifically that you can point to that you say, no, this is why and how it actually turned around?
You know, Maria, I think it needed some game minutes together. And by and large, knock on wood, this team has stayed relatively healthy throughout the course of the year as well. And for a group that had pretty much all new pieces together, they needed some time to get over the hump with each other and figure out who needed to be where. It's a very communication-oriented defense. And so to know where you need to be at a specific time where it'll look like man, then in the midst of a possession, it'll switch to zone depending on who has the basketball for the opponent. It's a complicated defense. And so this group needed some time to figure each other out with it. And now you're seeing a team that even if they have some breakdowns, have some breakdowns in this defense, they are still very locked into fixing it in the midst of a game. And that's something that has made Ron Hunter extremely happy.
So obviously time is needed to click in a defense like this, but communication, as you mentioned, is important as well. Who would you say is leading that defense, either physically or communication-wise?
You know, defensively, I think you got to start with the point guard in Rowan Brumbaugh, because he is the communicator on both ends of the floor here. And what he's done offensively, I think, is overshadowed a little bit of what he's done defensively. But then what Tulane has been able to find is a lot of length. They're a much longer team than they had been in years past here. And so guys like Caleb Banks, the transfer from Indiana, he's getting a lot of focus for what he's done scoring the ball, but he's been a very good post defender. Greg Glenn III has really leveled up after being a bench forward last year. He's been kind of an all-around guy now for this team. And the true freshman, Cam Williams, he's getting a lot of focus for his offense as well. Ron Hunter doesn't start true freshmen a lot in his career. This is really only the third one that he ever has. But it's been him on the defensive end that has really stood out to me. He is top 3 in the league in steals. His length really bothers people out on the perimeter. And so that has been a nice change, a nice improvement, I think, that maybe this team wasn't expecting from the youngster out of Lafayette, Louisiana, for him to pick up this defense so quickly.
You talked about how the offense is maybe a little undersung because of the way that the defense has been playing, but averaging over 60 or 76 points per game. They're in the top half of the conference in terms of points per game at the moment. After they were such a high-scoring team last year, what's contributed to the balance across the board? 5 players within a half point of averaging in double figures, and what does that say about the depth of this ball club?
Yeah, the depth is really fleshed out. And one of the big things that happens right at the start of conference play, Asher Woods, one of the veteran guards on this team, he entered the starting lineup due to an injury to Mari Jordan, who rolled his ankle right before league play. And Woods has been terrific scoring the ball here in the starting lineup. That has also allowed Rowan Brumbaugh to become more of a scoring threat because he can run off ball more. And now a guy who is top 2 in the league in assists, he's now averaging 17 a game in conference play because Asher has been able to come in, run a little bit of point from time to time. But that also goes to Greg Glenn III, the big man who's now running a bit of a point forward position for Tulane. He's averaging 6 assists a game in league play from the top. And so that has really allowed the Tulane backcourt to diversify what they do offensively. Brumbaugh came in really as a true point guard, but his scoring load has really increased in conference play. That's because Tulane has found a few more distributors of the basketball. KJ Green, a true freshman, has also been off the bench and done a nice job being a backup point guard in all this as well. So Tulane has a lot of guys who can facilitate the offense now, and that wasn't the case in November and December.
All right, conference wins against Charlotte, UTSA, South Florida, Florida Atlantic, and Rice so far. But the 2 losses have come against UAB and Temple, 2 teams that are above them right now in the conference standings. So any concern how they'll fare against some of those other top teams, starting with Memphis this week? That'll be a tough matchup in its own right, but they still have North Texas on the road. They've got to face UAB again later in the campaign. Any concern about how they'll match up with those ball clubs too?
You know, I think it's more of a curiosity because those 2 losses that they've had against UAB and Temple, both on the road, and both there were moments there late in the second half in which Tulane had the opportunity to push their way in front, just couldn't find the big bucket. They had a couple shots to tie at the end at Temple last weekend and not able to knock them down. And they had UAB on the ropes midway through the second half, but went on a bit of a scoring drought. And still the defense kept that game within reach, but they just weren't able to find enough consistent buckets to get past UAB. So I think it's a little bit more of a curiosity for Ron Hunter with Memphis coming into town on Thursday and what that group brings talent-wise to Fogelman and Devlin. That'll be a fascinating matchup for what Tulane has been able to show so far this year. And then going to North Texas, which seems like impenetrable for teams to go in and win at this point. Then you get UAB to end the season at home. So I think Tulane has shown a lot in the middle and the bottom of the league right now in terms of their opponents, who they have in the top 5, top 6. They've shown enough to win these games, just not enough to get over the finish line. Thursday is going to be a major test. The first one of these they've had this year at home, so that'll be even more fascinating.
That one on Thursday, 8 o'clock tip-off Central Time, and it's on ESPN too, but you can hear Corey Gloor calling it on the radio. And you've got men's basketball, you've got baseball coming up as well, and then in the fall, Green Wave fans can listen to Corey on the radio. The voice of the Green Wave. Corey, thanks so much for taking some time. Good luck on the call coming up, and have fun the rest of the year.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Maria. Appreciate it.
There he goes. Corey Gloor joining us here on All-American. Always great to have him and always insightful what he brings to the table, being around that team from the very jump to getting into what is now an impressive start to the season overall.
Yeah, Corey does such a great job, and I love the way that he's so insightful and everything that he offers, and now he gets to continue, as you said, calling games for a team that's winning now and doing well, and he's getting to see that progression. And I think that's always fun as somebody who covers a team or a conference or players. You're like, oh, I've been here when it wasn't great. It's fun to be here when things are going well.
That's why we love being here when things go great on All-American with the American Athletic Conference, and that's exactly
like
the case.
when we won the Bowl Challenge Cup. That was cool.
You're darn right.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to a team that has had some things going right in their own way as of late. How about the 3 straight wins from the East Carolina Pirates? Maria playing some good basketball as of late and trying to figure out a way to work their way back into the top half of the schedule and top half of the standings.
Well, I think all season long, we maybe haven't paid as much attention to them because we were looking at those top teams in the conference, like the North Texas, the Temple, the Memphis. And they've beat Temple this year already. They, at the very end of the game, they've been playing really well, and they're finally starting to get over that hump and win some of those games. Yeah. They've won their last 3. They were in the game with North Texas. That's the last one that they lost. So I think there's something brewing for the Pirates right now, and I'm excited to see where it goes, especially they have some tougher games coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to get tough. Just like I asked Corey a moment ago about Tulane in the back half of their schedule. East Carolina's winning the games they probably should. They beat Wichita State in a close matchup. They went to overtime but took care of business late against Tulsa. And then they had an impressive win, probably their best conference win so far, beating South Florida by a significant margin and kind of controlling the Bulls for much of that basketball game. But I've said it the last few years, and I've actually said it on this show already. The Pirates are close. And I believe in what Michael Schwartz is building there at East Carolina. They're 4th in total defense. That's an improvement even from last year where they were 5th in the conference in total defense, so they've already seen an improvement there. They were 12th last year in scoring. They only really had R.J. Felton as a go-to scorer a year ago. It wasn't that well-rounded bunch that he has at the table now. So instead of R.J. Felton and Jaden Walker and Brandon Johnson, who was really good last year as a redshirt junior, they're relying on multiple guys to come in and score. And that includes Felton again, but C.J. Walker, the UCF transfer, Jordan Riley, the Temple transfer. That trio has helped lead the way, and then they're getting some talent to fill in elsewhere.
Well, you kind of took exactly what I was going to say. Getting those transfers in was a big deal for East Carolina because it just adds a little bit more offensively, so the focus isn't solely on R.J. Felton. So you have a couple different people who can score the basketball, and then you also mentioned their defense. In addition to that, they're at the top of the conference in rebounding and categories involving that. So they're second in offensive rebounds. Defensive rebounds, they're kind of middle of the pack, but overall they do a really good job on the glass. And we've seen that play out, especially in the American, how much of a key factor that is in games. And so I think that that's something that's been helping East Carolina in addition to the transfers and the other people that are scoring as well.
Yeah, you talk about the rebounding in that win against South Florida. They out-rebounded the Bulls 48-27 over the course of the game. And it starts with one of the smaller players on the court. And he's not a small player by any stretch, but he's 6'3", and that's R.J. Felton. The guy who is their leading scorer is also their leading rebounder, and he's 6'3", having rebounds off the glass up against the trees like he has been. He's this game against South Florida was the 3rd time in conference that he's had double-digit rebounds. He did so against Temple. He did so against Memphis, and he's able to add another opportunity at a double-double threat. All 3 of these guys are double-double threats, and you can have this opportunity. If any of these guys go off, the other one might be rebounding. If 2 of these guys go off, the third one is probably rebounding at that point. This quartet, I know a triplet, but the quartet, I'm going to throw.
About triplets,
I know some things about triplets. You're darn right. Absolutely. I want to add Cam Hayes into the mix, though, because if you take these 3 players, Felton, Walker, Riley, and you put Cam Hayes in there, they make up 77% of the Pirates' point production throughout the season. So they have the transfers. They have the ability. I like what they're building. Depth, again, and I've talked about depth a lot on the show because I think it's important whenever you get to March. Depth is such a big thing in this conference, and some of the better teams with the better depth are up there at the top. I think ECU's starting to build that, and they've got the guys leading the way that are going to have some success in these big games.
I think they have the pieces. You see those numbers right there from those 3 guys, the triplets, as your I guess we're going to call them that for today's show. But they have those 3 that are kind of leading the way. As you said, you add in Hayes as well. If they can could just have one or two other people show up on a given night, I think that puts them in a really good position. And I think that's why they're winning some of the games that they're winning right now, is because they will have somebody who steps up, and collectively as a team, they're doing the little things that coaches like. Correct. They're rebounding. They're playing pretty good defense. So if you can do that, then you put yourself in a good position to at least have a chance to win basketball games.
I'm currently racking my brain of how to make a creative nickname that has something to do with like purple and pirates and triplets and whatever, like the purplets. I don't know if that's a weird word.
Is that going to be it? We'll have to check in
pirates,
with East Carolina.
I don't even know if what it ends up being. But
a lot of puns.
No matter what, I really do like what Coach Schwartz is doing there in East Carolina, and you can start seeing that winning. They've got some tough ones on the horizon.
Yes.
They've got Temple coming up. They've got they go to Rice, then they play UTSA, and then they've got UAB on the horizon as well. That's the upcoming games for East Carolina. Speaking of the Temple Owls, as we transition, they had a tough week in Texas.
Yeah.
They went for that Texas two-step. They entered with a ton of momentum. Of course, you and I were on the call for this matchup in the Super Pit at North Texas, and they controlled this game early, looked really good. They controlled the pace of play. They were up and down the floor, much like Mashburn and Adam Fisher and this entire team wanted to go. And ultimately, North Texas did what North Texas did, and they slowed them down. They tapped the brakes, and from that point forward, you got to make shots, and they didn't necessarily do so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first half of the game, it was so low scoring. What was it, 27-26, I think, at the half.
Break, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that Temple wants to push the pace. They want to score, but they just weren't able to. But they still stayed in that game. We talked about it a lot on the call, just the intensity of those two teams and the way that they just literally looked like they wanted to kill each other, but in the best basketball way possible. And as you said, they just didn't make shots when they needed to, and that ultimately is what hindered them as well. And then when they go to play UTSA, it was kind of, for lack of a better word, almost like a hangover from that North Texas loss. It didn't seem like they could get things going as they like, and then there just wasn't as much efficient shooting, and I think they just need to kind of figure out how to get back on track and find a rhythm again.
It felt like North Texas beat them twice.
Yes.
Is kind of what it did, because they go from the Super Pit to the Convocation Center down in San Antonio, and the Roadrunners were up by 16 points before Temple really started to fight back. It was 23-7 before things really happened, and that run in the beginning of the second half was big as well. This team is crazy talented. They've got guys across the board. We've talked about Jamal Mashburn and how great he is. Of course, he was the American Conference Player of the Week in the week that they beat Memphis going into that North Texas matchup. He was the reigning Player of the Week in the conference. But they've got some guys outside of that. I really like what Zion Stanford has done, what Barry has done at the guard spot. Both guys are super talented in their own right. Long, athletic guards who can shoot from anywhere on the floor. They can drive and get dirty in the post. They can draw the foul. They do everything well. Stanford, of course, was an all-freshman team honoree a year ago, and he's living up to that hype as a stunning sophomore at the same time. But they need post play. Maria, we watched the game up close, and they got bullied by Mulai Sissoko in North Texas in that game. Babatunde Duradola is a good player, the true freshman that's in the post, starting center for this Temple team. Good player. He's going to be great in this program and great in this league as the years go on, but he needs to take a step himself. He had no points, 2 rebounds in 20 minutes of action at UTSA. Didn't have a much better stat line at North Texas. Ended up fouling out, getting in foul trouble. You got to try and combine the good guard play. They've got elite backcourt play. You got to find something in the front court, have something in the post that can build around it and help you rebound and help you set things up across the board.
And you see the difference, too, in that game against Memphis. He was a little bit more of a presence. He did a better he was great in that game. Exactly, and he did a much better job. And so you see the difference in the games that they win when he shows up and he supports that guard play. It takes a little bit of the pressure off Jamal Mashburn or Quante Barry and Zion Stanford. I feel like, especially in that North Texas game when we were watching it, Mashburn almost looked like he felt like he needed to do everything because they weren't getting as much support from underneath. So I think just that's going to be the difference, because the possibility of it is there. We've seen him play well. We've seen some of those post players do a good job. Now, can they just kind of get that all together? One thing that I think is interesting, is the fact of how they're going to respond to these two losses. I think you saw the way that they responded after they lost to East Carolina. They beat Rice, and then they have a huge win against Memphis. And so I think that's one thing that –
and they're undefeated at home.
Exactly.
So they still find ways to win across the board on Broad Street.
Yes.
This team's not done yet.
No,
they're
absolutely
too talented to let these two losses derail the season.
Yeah, and I'm excited to watch because when they're good, they're very good.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just want to see them respond to these most recent losses and then see where they go from there.
And I mentioned Duradola and what he does as a freshman. I also want to say Steve Settle, 6'11".
Yeah.
He's a stretch guy, not really a physical presence, kind of undersized guy. He was even when he redshirted with Howard, he was about 160 pounds, was able to gain some weight, got to 180. Now he's a D1 prospect. He's a legitimate player too, but he's more of a stretch for a long-range guy. He needs to find a way to continue rebounding. He's a top 15 rebounder in the conference. They need him to continue to work the boards along with Duradola, who's the physical presence down low. Settles more of the length and the size underneath. So lots of that still to come together overall. I think Temple's an extremely talented team. They're not done yet. As we saw last year in the tournament. We saw last year that they weren't
They're pretty
done
good in the
yet.
postseason as well. So lots
Adam
of basketball.
Fisher knows how to get them up for the postseason. We'll see what happens.
I'm excited to watch it. Now, another team that knows a little bit about postseason basketball is the Florida Atlantic Owls, and they're starting to show that maybe they will make some noise in the postseason. They made a lot of noise a couple of years ago, just even beyond conference play and conference tournament. I mean, they weren't even making it at that
Nothing
point.
Crazy.
Nothing like that.
Dusty May, who's now at Michigan.
Yeah, kind of did a good job. But
they're pretty good.
They're starting to settle in under the new coaching staff, and they're starting to look pretty good.
I like the talent. I actually saw Florida Atlantic this week when they came to Denton. I didn't call the game, but I got to watch up close and personal. I caught up with Ross Hodge, the North Texas head coach, after the game, just kind of ran into him in the tunnel. First thing he said to me wasn't, wow, we pulled that one out. Yeah, wow, we played really well there, talking about his own team. He said, boy, how talented are those guys? Talking about Florida Atlantic. He said they were talented. He said maybe I had a little bit of nerve early on. They made some good adjustments. He actually credited one of his assistant coaches walking by with making a great call to trap a couple of these players from Florida Atlantic. John Jacobs, the head coach, new head coach, first year as a head coach after being the Baylor associate. Another individual out of the Scott Drew coaching tree down there at Baylor. And if you know anything about the Scott Drew coaching tree, it's had some success recently. A guy named Grant McCaslin, who's now at Texas Tech. A guy named Jerome Tang, who's now at Kansas State. And that's just the beginning. There's a lot of guys that have come out of that tree previously. Jacobs is the next in line. And when you talk about the pedigree built from the program before him, he was given a good spot to work with. They have a good NIL collective. They have a good program, great fan base that's still excited about hoops down there in Paradise. I'm interested to see how they come together because I agree with Coach Hodge. When I watched that game yesterday, they have length. They have some great forward play. A couple guys, 6'11". Baba Miller has been really good as of late, averaging about 12 points, 7 rebounds, 3 blocks per game in his last 11 games. On the season, he's tied for first among all players in the conference in terms of blocks per games, and he's 8th in rebounds. He continues to be a good player, and he can stretch the floor and score from anywhere. They've got a 7-footer down low, too, that they can rely on and have some physicality and great guard play up top. I think, for the most part, when you look at Florida Atlantic, sure, they're 3-4. They're one game under 500 in conference play. But take my warning now. Go ahead and clip this so that way when I'm right later in the season.
He said this about East Carolina football, and we had to
did.
continuously tell him that he was right because you were.
Exactly. This team is dangerous. Florida Atlantic is dangerous. I know they're 3-4 right now, and they haven't played the best basketball, but when they click, I guarantee you this is not a team that Temple or North Texas or UAB or Memphis wants to see in the tournament.
Yeah, I mean, there's pieces there, right? You just mentioned a couple of them, and then you have first-year head coach. And so it's still in that period where you're trying to put the pieces together, but there's some really big highlights. The offense is really good for Florida Atlantic. You already mentioned some of those guys. Where they're struggling a little bit is defensively. So can they be better on the defensive side of the basketball, and that can maybe even out. They're second in the conference in scoring behind UAB, who is just offensively so powerful.
Yeah, they're unbelievable.
Yeah, so I think that I'm going to have to agree with you as well. I think that there could be something brewing down in Florida Atlantic, but they just need to put some of those pieces together.
I also caught up with some of the assistants after the game. Isaiah Austin is one of their assistants. If you remember Isaiah Austin, he was a star at Baylor and ended up going to the NBA draft. He was going to be a lottery pick, but because of a health condition, he was unable to participate in the NBA draft, and they found it at the NBA scouting combine. He's one of the best people and one of the best coaches you could find. He was on the sideline during that game earlier this weekend, and I got to catch up with him a bit afterwards. I told him I'd give him a shout-out because he watches All-American. So Isaiah Austin, one of the best out there. But he's a big reason why this team is playing as well as they have on the offensive side. He wishes he could have a little more defensive prowess, as you can see because of the graphic here. They've got to find a way to slow teams down. They've got to find a way to they're also tops in adjusted tempo, though.
Yeah.
They get up there and run. They get up and down the floor. So that's part of what the defense and the rankings there on the defensive side looks like. But I believe in what John Jacobs is doing, and I like the coaching staff and the talent around them. This team's going to be dangerous. And it may not be this year, but I think it will be this year.
Okay, we're calling it. Pay attention in the tournament.
It's gonna be dangerous.
Kyle's, this will be clipped. So that doesn't happen for a couple months. There's some more pressing games that are upcoming on the schedule that we definitely want to take a look at. The few games in the next couple of weeks. You look at that schedule, which one sticks out to you?
That Memphis-Tulane game on Thursday. We just talked to Corey about it as well. That game on ESPN2 at 9 p.m. Eastern tip time. I'm excited about that one because that's kind of what Corey said. He said it's an opportunity, right? It's a chance for Tulane to prove they belong in this whole thing. Plus, if they win, it shakes up everything.
Yes,
then UAB's back in the mix.
Yep.
Then North Texas is the one that's leading the way at the moment with a tough schedule on the horizon. And then, of course, Tulane is squarely in the hunt for that top seed overall. It even puts Temple back in the fold after losing 2 games. That East Carolina-Temple game is a sneaky one too, Maria.
Yeah, that was the one I was going to circle. East Carolina-Temple. Especially because East Carolina beat them by a point last time. Temple's trying to find their footing. I think that's going to be interesting. Memphis and Rice is our American Hoops Showcase game this upcoming weekend, so that's certainly one that everybody's going to want to pay attention.
So you'll be back on the sideline
I
for
will.
that one?
I'll be in Houston, we're going to do some fun stuff, so make sure everyone tunes into that one. And then
the Tudor Fieldhouse.
Yeah,
it's actually a fun venue. I really like it.
I've never been there, so
it's fun. It's an intimate basketball venue, and it's a shooter's gym. Keep that in mind.
Okay, good
Absolutely.
to know. So we'll have to keep an eye out on that, especially.
I'm also looking at this North Texas.
I was
UAB
about to
matchup.
say, North Texas. I mean, we talked about it already. How well they're playing right now defensively. It's the best defense in the conference against the best offense. Yep. So I am excited to see how that one plays out. So.
That's a tough schedule and a tough turnaround for the Mean Green too, because they turn around. They play Wichita State in the midweek, and then they have UAB on Monday, or they have Tulane on Saturday. Then they have UAB on Monday. So it's actually a little out of order here. But that Monday matchup with UAB is going to be a fun one. Tulane, North Texas, I'll be on the call for that one for ESPN Plus. Excited for that as well. And then Temple, Memphis. How about the rematch down there in the bottom left-hand corner?
The rematch. Temple has to go on the road. The Tigers, I think, are probably going to be seeking some revenge. So.
That's on Super Bowl Sunday, too.
Oh, my goodness.
It's the biggest game of Super Bowl Sunday. Easy money.
Yes.
Especially in Philadelphia's market.
Oh, yeah. I think
Memphis isn't far from Kansas City either.
Yeah. I think that's going to be an interesting one. So everybody's going to be watching that. They will not be tuned in to the Eagles and the Chiefs.
Yeah, forget that game. That game's not nearly as fun. You know what else is fun, though? Getting to catch up with our student athletes. We've got a great one joining Maria right now.
Mashburn rejected by Lorient. Lorient with the basketball. Ricochets it off of Mashburn. North Texas basketball. This man's on another level right now.
No, he is playing lights out right now.
Brenen, Lorient, you are certainly on another level in that game against Temple, so that's why you get to join All-American today. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Appreciate you having me.
We're going to talk all about your team and the success that you've been having, but let's start with that play that we just watched because I think it's something that required so much court awareness and so much athleticism. So can you kind of walk me through what was going through your mind in that moment?
In that moment, the big man set a ball screen. We had switched, and the only thing I was thinking, I just can't let him go by me because that was the whole game plan. So once he put that punch dribble, I knew he was getting ready to shoot. It was a dead giveaway, and that was the result.
Yeah, well, the result definitely played out well for you in that moment and that whole game. Your team remained undefeated at home. You're now 11-0 at the Super Pit. What do you think it is about your team that makes them play so well, especially on your home court?
I think all of us are older guys. I think we understand what it takes to win and what it would take to win at a high level. Early in the season, we took a couple tough losses to some better teams, and that definitely prepared us for what's to come this season.
You're playing well at home this season, but you're also playing very well in conference play, your entire Mean Green team. What do you think your team has done better within the last couple of games just to be this successful in the American?
I think the past few games we found a better way to buckle down and execute down the stretch. Early in the season, we were having a hard time just finishing when the game was close towards the end, but now we definitely got a little more experience in that aspect.
When people talk about North Texas, the first thing that they mention is your team's defense. What is it about Coach Hodge that gets you to play such tough and gritty defense?
Man, Coach Hodge, at first, it was kind of tough because he's not used to getting yelled at, but he's a guy that really cares about the whole team, and when he is yelling, you just really see how much he cares. So I think that's a big driving factor, a coach that really cares for his guys.
Can you explain or give an example of him just showing how much he cares? Maybe it's the way that he gets on you guys to play, or maybe a fun moment with Coach Hodge that really exemplifies who he is.
Let me see. Coach Hodge, let me say, after Oregon State game, that was an early game in the season. People didn't expect us to win. Coach Hodge, he comes in at halftime. He's like, do I have to believe more than you guys that we're the greatest team in the conference? Do I have to believe more than you guys? He's like, because there's nobody that can touch us if we believe. And after that, we just seen how serious he was, and it was no looking back.
Well, I feel like you have all certainly bought into believing that you are one of the best teams in the conference, especially with that record right now. You have a couple of games coming up, Wichita State in particular. How are you getting ready for that game and then the ones ahead on the schedule, especially some of those bigger matchups?
As everybody knows, our league is super competitive, very close in points differential. So everybody on every night can beat anybody, and we're taking it one game at a time and just trying to prepare and execute the game plan as best as we can.
Individually, you're averaging 12.8 points per game, and you're having a fantastic season. What do you think it is about this year that has really helped you grow both on and off the court?
I would definitely want to say the coaching staff this summer, the biggest thing they stressed to me was just growing up in a sense, everything you can't control and everything you don't need to control. So just focus on what you can and do the best you can in each area.
How did you take that, especially within the last couple of games? Because I feel like we've seen even a jump from the beginning of the season until now. How did you take that mentality of growth and apply it on the court?
At first, it was definitely not easy. I definitely had to let go of some pride and ego and just know that the coach has what's best for me in heart and the team in heart. And I just had to give my faith to that and try my best every single time we go out on the floor.
Well, it certainly seems to be working both for you individually and for your team. Brenen, thank you so much for taking some time and joining All-American today.
I appreciate you having me.
Always fun. And great job on the interview, as always.
Thank you. Lots of fun talking to student athletes, for sure.
It gives you that insight that we don't get anywhere else. We also have some top plays to get to here on All-American. Let's start on the hardwood, as pretty much all of them are this time of year. Let's go to the women's game. East Carolina in a tight one against South Florida. South Florida on a run. They have the drive from Joyner, and then Tatiana Weish is there to make the putback, ending that 10-0 run for the Bulls. The putback as she reached backwards, draws the foul, has the and one. I don't know how she tipped it back up and in like that.
I have no idea. The athleticism to jump in the air just to get the rebound and then just release
it. Looked like a volleyball set.
It really did. It was and also to stay on her feet because she was I can't lean that far back. Like, I'm too old. That'll hurt. She was like this. Big play there from the Pirates. And, another team that's been playing pretty well, but on the men's side are the Memphis Tigers.
Absolutely.
This is the preseason number 1 versus the preseason number 2. Dane Deja started the game for the first time since the 3rd game of the season. A steal, a beautiful pass, and then an alley-oop from Deja. Tigers rolling in this one over UAB.
Deja, of course, the difference maker. We talked about it earlier back in the starting lineup for the Tigers, and they've had some success, 4-0 with him in the starting lineup this season. Moving on to number 3 here on All-American Top Plays. We go back to the Super Pit. North Texas and reigning player of the year, Jamal Mashburn, has this one rejected by the Mean Greens, Brenen Lorient. Lorient with the block and the ability to track down the basketball on the sideline and then hit it off of Mashburn right in front of the phenomenal TV crew that was calling this game for ESPN+. And Ross Hodge, after the game, said that this was one of the more athletic plays that has ever been made in a North Texas uniform. ESPN even posted it on their website. Didn't make top plays, but I think it should have because it made our top plays.
I think it should have too, because there's athleticism in this play, but there's also the awareness just to be able to throw it off of Mashburn. Lorient was fantastic in that game, and this play is an example of it.
Had a career high in blocks, points, and rebounds along the way. He took over in that second half. And to block the reigning American Conference Player of the Week like this in a moment of that game, that moment, it was tight. Temple was trying to continue making a run and keeping it in their favor. Weren't able to do so. Lorient said no.
No. Big plays in big moments. And that seems to be a trend, because here's another one from that South Florida game. But this one for the Bulls, just seconds left on the clock. It's not going to be a buzzer beater, but look at that play from Victoria Blazek. Oh, my goodness. South Florida wins that game because of that bucket right there.
We've talked about Blazek and the Bulls. Don't sleep on them. They've had a slow start to the year, lost a couple games they probably should have or shouldn't have, but this East Carolina matchup, that was a good test on the road for Coach Jose Fernandez and company. Blazek's needed to step up, and that long finish on the opposite side of the hoop. Oh, it was so clean. South Florida gets the win 63-60. I love it.
Beauty.
Top play. Here we go, of the week in the American. This is an incredible play. Contested baseline jumper starts us off. Oh, my goodness. Where did Jacob Dar come from? Of course, you had Denver England miss the shot and then taking off from the three-point line on a beeline to time it up perfectly. He reaches back with the one hand. Look at where he takes off from. Watch it right here. He's going to take off right there. Boom. Breaks to the basket, no hesitation, makes the play. He was cleared for flight. I don't know if it was from Hobby Airport or George Bush Airport, but either way, get out of Jacob Dar's way. He has the top play of the week here at All-American.
He made it right through TSA pre-check, no problem. Just
no problem.
Boom. One-handed as well.
No metal detectors.
Nothing. He just went right in. We should check security. Anyway, top play of the week.
That was a great one. That was one of the more athletic. We talked about the Lorient play being athletic. That one, that's impressive.
Yeah. Lots of
the
athletic
timing
plays.
of it could not have been more perfect.
And it's the one hand for me, too. Like, the fact that he was able to just get it with one hand and just slam it down. When I watched it, I'm like, oh, my gosh. Yeah, that's why I could never play basketball.
Over the top of a defender?
Yeah. We forgot. We didn't even mention that part.
Yeah, that was pretty big, too.
Yeah, lots of big plays in the American this week.
Absolutely. All right, that does it for us here on All-American. Maria, of course, you'll be in the Hoops Showcase this week down in Houston.
Yep.
Keep in mind for that one and continue to follow those along the way as we continue to showcase some of the best hoops around the American Athletic Conference. Shout out to Chris and Zach in the back, everybody that makes this show possible. For Maria Trivelpiece, I'm Kyle Youmans. We'll see you next week with more All-American.